The film begins with a recording showing 4 girls kidnapped in a barn on a pig farm. During a ritual conducted by the cult of John Mallam, one of them is killed. Meanwhile, the recording begins to suffer strange interference and is cut off. Then, we meet Police Captain Will Loren, responsible for dismantling John Mallam's cult and rescuing 3 of the kidnapped girls. He seems distant, and a colleague notices his state and asks if everything is all right. Will only says that he is tired and goes to his locker, where there is a newspaper clipping highlighting that he was treated as a hero for the operation. Despite the congratulations from his colleagues, he does not react well to the recognition. While the colleagues celebrate the rescue of the 3 victims, Will feels guilty for not having saved the 4th. Price tries to calm him down, saying that he did everything he could and reminding him that he is respected by the entire department, asking him to react better to the situation. After the colleagues leave, the scene cuts to Will standing in front of a room, observing the place in a strange way. At the shooting range, 2 police officers are talking normally about the previous night, when one of them is killed by a gunshot. Then it is revealed that Will is responsible, and he also kills the other officer. After the sequence of deaths, Will is surrounded by the police and ordered to drop the gun. He asks to say goodbye to Jessica and Diane, saying that he is very sorry. Before killing himself, he says he is safe in the arms of his master. 1 year later, Jessica joins the police, following in her father's footsteps. She visits his grave before her first day of work and says that she will do her best. On the way out, she finds Diane in an unstable state, and the 2 argue. Jessica wants answers about the past, and Diane says that she is obsessed and that Will was not innocent. Irritated, Jessica disagrees with the idea that he was a murderer and leaves. After the conversation, Will's grave appears with Mallam's cult symbol carved into it. On duty, Jessica witnesses the arrest of cult members singing on the steps of a church. Then, she is surprised by 2 girls who throw a pig's head against the windshield and warn her before fleeing. After that, she goes to the police station where her father carried out the massacre. The building is about to be decommissioned, and she chooses to spend her first shift there to investigate what happened that night. Upon entering the police station, Jessica hears the sound of a ball bouncing through the corridors and follows it until she finds Officer Grip Cohen. He finds her presence strange and asks how long she has been there. Jessica says she has just arrived, but he asks her to turn around, and she obeys without understanding. She reports having seen members of the cult outside. Grip answers that he already knows about the problem and explains that it started after the fall of the farm cult, with members still at large and carrying out actions in protest against Mallam's arrest. Then, he takes her to the area where she will work and explains her duties. Before leaving, he asks if she really volunteered for that shift. Upon discovering that she is Will Loren's daughter, Grip changes his tone and confronts her, saying that he distrusts her because of her father's history. Jessica defends him, stating that Will was not a murderer as they say. Grip insists, reminding her that he killed colleagues and then committed suicide. Jessica replies that she is not there to justify herself and only asks to work. Grip says that if that were really relevant, he would already have informed the chief about her presence. After he leaves, she intends to stay in the room, but she begins hearing strange noises throughout the building and becomes uncomfortable. The sound of the elevator operating increases her suspicion. She checks the police station's floor plan and, even afraid, decides to verify where the noises are coming from. In the bathroom, she checks her father's locker, but realizes that it is locked, and new noises draw her attention, but she finds no one. Then, the sound of a bouncing ball draws her attention again and leads her to the court, where she finds an abandoned ball. When she looks around, she notices a figure at the entrance of the gym. Frightened, she turns on the lights, but the figure disappears from the place. The station bell rings, and Jessica notices movement at the entrance of the building. Outside, she finds a homeless man who speaks in a confused and meaningless way. Unable to understand him, she tries to interact to help, but he does not respond. Then, the man urinates at the entrance and leaves, leaving Jessica speechless. After cleaning up the mess, she takes a cutting tool and tries to open her father's locker, but cannot because she lacks the strength. Then, she thinks about using a fire extinguisher to break the lock, but is interrupted by a phone call. Jessica answers the call, and realizing that it is only members of the cult making provocations, ends the call. The phone immediately rings again with the same kind of interference, which makes her irritated and causes her to threaten to take action against those responsible. Jessica tries to trace the calls through another police station. However, when she mentions her name, the officer treats her with contempt because of Will and ends the conversation, claiming to have more important matters. Outraged by the lack of help, Jessica uses her gun to force the lock on her father's locker. Inside it, she finds an old newspaper, a photo of the two of them together, and a hidden compartment. When she opens it, she discovers a box with clippings about disappearances linked to the cult, realizing Will's obsession with the case. Then, pig grunts echo through the place, and she returns to her room to report what happened. The officer suspects that they are only prank calls, but Jessica says that this time there is a large pig tied up outside the police station. He replies that there is nothing to do and instructs her to remain inside the building. Jessica asks if that decision has anything to do with the fact that she is a woman, but he denies it and explains that the city is taken over by cult actions, making it impossible to respond to everything immediately. He adds that, if she gets hurt, there will be no support available at the moment. Before ending the call, he apologizes for the stress and says that the team is overloaded, promising help later. With no alternatives, Jessica goes out to release the animal. Outside, she notices the cult symbol marked on the pig and a necklace from one of the victims around its neck, which reminds her of the materials linked to her father's case. Jessica locks the pig in one of the station rooms and hears new noises throughout the building again, deciding to investigate. During the investigation, she finds an open door and believes someone is in the place, even alerting other officers. Then, she closes the access and heads toward the new banging sounds echoing through the corridors. She hears a man scream and follows the direction of the voice, seeing someone quickly enter a room. When she approaches, she notices papers scattered around and moves forward to contain the suspect. She orders him to lie down on the floor, but when he turns around, she discovers that it is the same homeless man from before, holding his deceased daughter's shoe. He refuses to obey and tries to attack her, but Jessica reacts in time and neutralizes him with a stun gun. Jessica manages to contain the man and takes him to a cell, but he resists, falls to the floor, and refuses to enter, insisting in a confused way that his daughter is still present in the place. Unable to control him, she enters the cell to try to force him to move, while he screams uncontrollably. Suddenly, the door closes by itself, trapping her inside. She tries to make contact by radio, but only receives static with no clear response. A distorted transmission comes through the device and makes the man even more agitated, causing him to charge against the door. In desperation, Jessica drops the flashlight and, while looking for it, realizes that it has been activated. In panic, she arms herself and hesitates, but the light reveals something that does not correspond to what she expected. Then, she hears her father's voice calling for her, which increases her confusion. The flashlight is thrown, and when she recovers it, she shines it on the man. Hanging bodies fall before her, leaving her completely shaken. Shortly after, the door opens and she manages to get out, in shock. After closing the cell, Jessica tries to calm herself by repeating police code procedures. Still shaken, she returns to her room and tries to contact Central Dispatch, but gets no response. Remembering the personal number left by Officer Grip, she decides to call him. Grip shows irritation when he answers and questions the reason for the call at that hour. Jessica comments that she heard an argument when she arrived and asks if there is anyone else in the building. He avoids answering directly and says that the place is filled with a toxic atmosphere that can cause hallucinations. Then, Jessica informs him that she arrested a homeless man and asks for guidance. Grip, still impatient, says that he will send support and asks her not to call again. Jessica tries to emphasize that she heard and saw strange things, but Grip ignores her and orders her to keep the prisoner under control and wait for the patrol. With no way out, she follows the instruction and ends the call. Alone, she begins collecting items scattered on the floor and finds photos related to Malam's cult, as well as a flash drive that sparks her curiosity. Later, when she goes to the car to get her computer, a vehicle appears at high speed, and a man throws a woman out before fleeing. Jessica offers to help, and the woman asks if that is her first day there. When she confirms it, Jessica hears that no experienced police officer would accept that situation. The woman talks about her difficult life, saying that her father was a police officer and that she ended up prostituting herself to survive. At a certain point, she becomes distant until Jessica calls her back. The conversation continues with the woman asking if she is alone and saying that she would not want to stay there after what she saw. Jessica mentions the massacre of the police officers, but the woman denies it and speaks in a confused way about the flock of the mountain, saying that she was locked up on the same day. Jessica does not understand what Mary is talking about. Mary says that 3 members of the cult hanged themselves in jail and says she saw everything with her own eyes, contradicting the version Jessica knew. When remembering what happened, she goes into shock, begins reciting the cult's words, and loses control. Jessica tries to calm her down, but shortly after, Mary comes back to herself, apologizes, and leaves. After Mary leaves, Jessica receives another call from the cult informing her that Monica Matthews has been kidnapped. Upon hearing the name of one of the girls rescued by Will and the victim's cries for help, she begins to take the threat seriously. The kidnapper states that John Malam will return and that Will started something the cult intends to finish that night. Jessica informs another police station, discovers that Monica and the other 2 survivors have disappeared, and while they try to trace the call, decides to analyze the flash drive left by her father in search of answers. When she opens the flash drive, Jessica finds a folder with 9 videos and starts the first one. In it, a hostage begs for her own life before being surrounded by cult members and executed in a ritual. Shaken, she stops the playback. Soon after, she receives a call from Diane, and the video starts playing by itself again. Diane accuses her of ignoring her and says that she is weak. Jessica tries to calm her down and asks her to eat and stay sober. During the call, Diane begins to hear the cult's chants and panics, asking where Jessica is. Jessica tries to end the call, but Diane becomes desperate because of the sounds and demands that she hang up. Jessica tries to shut down the computer, but cannot. The call with Diane ends amid her despair. Then, the female cult members seem to stare at Jessica and call her by name. A new video shows herself in that room, acting strangely and knocking over her father's belongings box. Confused, she finds a shooting target. Jessica enters the old shooting range, now abandoned and gloomy, and finds a newspaper attached to a mannequin. When she approaches, a machine is activated and a target with the cult symbol moves toward her. When she removes it, she finds a creature hidden behind the panel and flees in despair. The entity chases her, but she manages to reach the front area and finds the doors chained. In panic, she activates the radio and asks the officer for help, and he tries to calm her down and states that a team is on the way. Jessica threatens to shoot her way out if they do not arrive soon. The officer insists that she wait and control herself. Then, she asks if John Malam really died in jail. He replies that there are only rumors and that either way he is dead. In shock, Jessica panics and asks to leave, while the officer reinforces that she needs to pull herself together because there are 3 girls depending on her. Jessica, in shock, begs to get out of that place. The officer tries to calm her and says that the cult is manipulating her because of her father, reinforcing that the victims rescued by Will do not see him as a murderer, but as a hero. He instructs Jessica to continue answering the calls and gather information for the tracing, since the team is trying to locate the origin of the contacts. He also warns about fires caused by the cult and says that in case of smoke, she can use her gun to open a path and leave the building. Then, new incidents arise and the call is ended. Jessica tries to control herself by repeating procedures from the police academy. Then, she notices a photo of her father and sees the cult symbol hidden behind it. Later, she receives a call with chanting and realizes that the sound seems to be coming from inside the police station. When she notices movement through the elevator, she prepares to react, but is surprised by a ball thrown at her. After that, she watches an old interrogation of Will with cult members. John makes threats against his family and suggests that something greater is influencing Will, in addition to stating that he is important to the cult. After the recording, Will begins acting strangely. When reviewing the video carefully, Jessica notices a presence behind John. Before she can react, she is surprised and taken to a morgue beside John and other cult members. Strapped to a stretcher, she begins to feel that the bodies around her are moving, falling into despair. She asks for help, and then other members appear, eliminate those present in the place, and remove John's body. After they leave, Jessica manages to free herself, but comes face to face with a corpse in front of her and panics. Soon after, she wakes up, realizing that everything was nothing more than a vision. Still shaken by the vision, Jessica hears someone calling and reacts by drawing her gun, afraid of a new threat. She then finds two of Will's former colleagues, Officer Price and Officer Hudson. Price informs her that they came to collect the prisoner she mentioned and tells Hudson to go get him. Hudson hesitates and shows fear, and the two end up deciding by chance who will go. Hudson loses and walks away to carry out the task, while Price stays with Jessica and starts a conversation. He comments that he heard she joined the police, but did not expect her to be in that place. Then, he says that Will was considered a hero by him until the day of the massacre. Jessica takes the opportunity to ask what really happened that day, but Price avoids answering. She insists that she has the right to know the truth, and Price decides to talk. Price admits that he failed by not reporting Will's strange behavior to his superior, even though he noticed his obsession with the case. He states that during the recorded interrogation, Will said he saw things and that on the eve of the massacre, he had said something like John Malum is still here. Then, Price says that he needs to show something to Jessica and accompanies her to an old piece of evidence. He reveals the shotgun used in the massacre, explaining that it should have been destroyed along with the other materials, but ended up being stored. Suddenly, Jessica has visions again involving John Malum preaching to followers on the farm and performing the baptism of a baby. She then realizes that it is herself and that the woman beside him is her mother, waking up in shock at the police station upon hearing screams coming from the cell. When she reaches the place, she finds the prisoner asking for help while Hudson holds him at gunpoint. Jessica releases the prisoner, who flees through the building in a confused state. Then, she returns to the room and watches old videos involving her mother and her past. Meanwhile, the man wanders through the police station, follows a voice he believes is his daughter's, and enters the room where the pig was. Shortly after, only the animal leaves the place. Jessica tries to contact her mother to get answers, but Diane does not return the calls. She then continues watching old recordings that reveal promises and fears linked to Will and John Malum's cult. Jessica reaches her hand toward Diane, but the situation quickly turns into panic when a grotesque creature appears and begins chasing her inside the police station. In desperation, she tries to lock herself in a room, but the entity continues looking for her and approaches again. With no way out, Jessica draws her gun and shoots when the figure reappears, discovering that in truth, it was the pig that had appeared earlier. Then, the bell rings and Jessica finds Diane outside, who confronts her for being in that place. Diane then reveals that she was part of the cult in the past, when she was still with Will and pregnant with Jessica. She says that she was influenced by John Malum, who promised that her daughter would have an important role in something grand, but she ended up distancing herself after witnessing disturbing events. Diane states that Will managed to protect them for a while, but that John returned to pursue them and seems not to have aged, indicating that the cult is still active and directly connected to the family. Diane seems to see Will inside the police station and follows him, while Jessica goes after her asking for explanations. In an office, Diane finds a toy and Jessica hears screams in another part of the building, asking her mother to stay where she is before going to check alone. She finds an armed woman holding a young woman hostage and tries to intervene, but the aggressor threatens to kill the girl, forcing Jessica to back down. The woman says that she is not there by choice, but by the will of an entity she calls the Low God, saying that he wants Jessica and that no one will come to help her. The kidnapper reinforces that everything is part of a larger plan of the cult and that Jessica has always been the target. The woman states that Jessica needs to obtain power for the ritual by committing a murder. After the execution of the hostage, Jessica shoots the aggressor, but is attacked by demonic creatures and retreats. She tries to find Diane but cannot. Then, she receives a call from a supposed officer, but becomes suspicious when he starts talking about her mother. Shortly after, Jessica realizes that she is talking to John, who says that he has returned to get her and announces the return of the god below that night. At the end of the call, we realize that the phone cord had been cut. Jessica finds the homeless man in a violent state and kills him after being attacked. Then, she faces new attacks inside the police station while trying to maintain control of the situation. When she sees Price and Hudson mocking her, Jessica realizes that they were also victims of the massacre. Soon after, she sees Will and confronts him, demanding answers about the past and the massacre. Will states that he killed everyone and reinforces a distorted vision of what police officers do, while Jessica realizes that he has a demonic appearance and behavior. The chaos intensifies when an attacker shoots her and flees, being chased and eliminated along the way, along with other cult members. Even while trying to save a woman, she arrives too late. Soon after, Diane's screams echo through the police station. Fearing the worst, Jessica takes her father's gun and runs to find her. The situation worsens when she is taken to a lower area of the police station, where she finds cult members and a figure that reveals itself as John in grotesque form. A creature, a representation of the Low God, appears behind the cult members and walks toward Jessica. She comes into contact with the entity, then is taken back to the corridors. In panic, she fires in every direction, killing everything that moves. There, she shoots everything around her until she accidentally hits Diane. Jessica collapses when she sees that she hit Diane and enters a complete emotional breakdown, while the creatures approach and seem to feed on her despair. Unable to handle the pressure of the situation, she ends up taking her own life under the gaze of the cult members. After that, her body is dragged and placed beside John's. The sequence ends in a dark way, with Jessica reviving at the end.